Coin Traders, what is going on? Thanks for joining me for the show. Looking at STX, STX on that ticker. Nice little rebound move here after finding a bottom on this little flush and pullback. STX actually didn't retrace that much considering the rest of crypto. So if we actually look from the even trend high right around 385 down to the low just above 211, 211.51, looking at a 45% retracement. Still pretty significant of a retracement from the trend high right now, especially since that did break a lot of this daily structure, unfortunately. But finding a very nice bottom and now a rebound, still looking like a good setup, especially on some of the longer charts we'll talk about here in a second. So looking at longer term closing support coming in right at 225. Above that, we were looking at resistance points right at 243. And then the next rejection point was at 259. So the fact that now, instead of finding resistance at these previous levels of support, we actually found a lot of upside breaking through that is a pretty good sign. One thing that I do want to look at right now too is just a very nice trend line that was forming from this initial resistance point, flipped it as support, and then flipped it as resistance on the bounce. So looking left, point of resistance, flipped it as support, resistance, and then now on the current daily candle, breaking it. So with just over an hour, about a little less than an hour and a half left at time of recording for the close, still looking pretty nice because especially as we see yesterday's candle rejected from not only this trend line, but also from the 26 and 50 period exponential moving averages after it did confirm the 12 period EMA as support once this nice bullish candle broke through this resistance point and also held a close on top of the 12 period EMA. But so along with that, we actually have another trend line to be looking at. And this one was resistance and support previously and could potentially push the price back in a wedge formation. So looking left, big point of resistance and resistance before finally a nice bullish candle flipped and broke that level before confirming it as daily closing support multiple times. And then now we do expect it to get stuck up as resistance once again. So price level for that would be right around 305. And so we're probably going to have a pretty decent setup right here, especially if we look at price level resistance coming in at about 309. So that's going to be effective and also see the price, whether or not we can actually break above both of those levels and actually flip these into support, or whether or not we will actually continue to stay inside of this zone, or whether or not we will actually break this trendline support and head to the downside once again, putting in that lower high for this trend. Because as we see, we had our trend high, which rejected from about the 380 level, pulled down, kicked off the support point, lower high, broke it, finally put in our low, and now we are rallying up to try to put in the next leg of upside. Obviously, pulling back, setting a higher low would be best case scenario, but hopefully we don't end up setting a lower high since we have broken daily structure, as well as confirming a lot of lower lows on these support points. Now flipping over into the weekly chart for STX, very good setup still despite the current sell-off and the break in structure on the daily and all that stuff. This is why we actually zoom out to longer term charts to see what things are looking at on different time frames. And so right now we know that still the path of least resistance is to the upside. The structure on the weekly is intact, and a lot of great things and signs can be found from this overall chart. So specifically want to zoom into the area that we had back in November and kind of coming right off the fall from the rally. So we actually had a very nice rally and a very nice hold of these exponential moving averages, finally getting our nice bullish flip on those. And then from there, we just had an extremely nice run with a lot of really nice bull volume, especially after the previous section that did look to backtest and hold the EMAs when they were really tight together. This is a very good sign of what we typically see when we see prices just rally above the EMAs. Very, very nice amount of volume coming in, putting in this very nice air gap between the 12 period EMA. And then we do start to see a gap and a widening of all these exponential moving averages as prices do get higher, which does mean that retracements do get more significant, but also that does mean that reliance on these exponential moving average is typically found. So on the first back test, actually had a back test where just the lower shadow and the bottom end of the wick tested this 12 period EMA, held it as very nice support. And then once again, we had our very nice rally, had a lot of support and dip buying even above this 12 period EMA, holding this very nice gap. And so right now, even coming off of the current trend high, and I believe it's the all-time high as well, had a very nice pullback, wicked well below, still holding support on top of the 26-period EMA, which is typically what we find since we do on these instances every pullback drop down an exponential moving average. So we had 12, 26, maybe even on the next one we will have a retracement. And more realistically, likely what will happen is the 50-period will actually catch up when we get our back test of that 50-period EMA. But right now, a lot of great dip buying. And as you can see, still maintaining a close for that weekly on top of the 12-period EMA. So a lot of these long downside shadows, just extremely nice, showing all this dip buying. So from the low, for example, on this first pullback, 30% of an upside move, and even on the weekly that just closed yesterday, 24%, almost 25%. So to the downside, still looking at 20 and 22% downside. So plenty of dip buying and a very, very strong lower shadow, especially when we look at the candle that just closed, forming a very nice bullish hammer candle formation and starting to get our follow through right now. If we look at the selling pressure, we actually see an overall taper off in selling pressure, which is interesting because coming off the trend high, less volume on this huge sell-off than we did experience here. But what's actually notable about that is that these two weekly bearish candles fit inside the body of the bullish candle as well, and also a lot big lower shadow, as you can see here, and then also a lower shadow about the size of the body of this bearish candle. So not necessarily the most bearish candles that we can see. So we know that there's a lot of indecision and a lot of bullish volume mixed in here. But overall, since the candle did still close bearish, we do have a bearish bar nonetheless. So regardless, what I'm trying to say is on this pullback, not necessarily that strong given the amount of volume that did come in on this sell-off. And then now we are starting to get a little bit more of this upside move, still with the opportunity and potential of having a lot more increasing bullish volume, since overall we have seen just a slowdown in all selling pressure. So even coming off the peak volume for bearish pressure, we had 84 million on this candle, and we had a huge upside wick for that with a small body. So a lot of selling pressure, which means a lot of volume. But ever since then, really not able to maintain a lot of that selling pressure. So yet still we've had a lot of these really nice bullish buying bars. So we've had a lot of upside pressure and still maintaining this trend. Still very good sign. So we know that the trend is still very much intact and we are still sitting in a bullish formation and setup despite having such big retracements, which are just great opportunities to dollar cost average and buy the dip, but of course not financial advice. Now, if we do pull up some technicals for this STX chart, you can see that we were hugely, extremely overbought, but it's not necessarily that much of an indicator when we do have strong upside moves, especially on the weekly, because typically when we talk about overbought levels, they're a little bit more reliable on some of the shorter term charts. But anyway, nonetheless, do want to actually talk about the stochastic RSI here because we are down now below the 20 line. And the last time this actually happened was back in the fall when we did have the same sort of setup and we did get our nice bullish cross, which led to the kickoff of this nice upside trend. So obviously nothing is a guarantee, but when we talk about similar patterns and setups, STX is still a pretty relatively new crypto, so we don't have a lot of historical data to go by. But the last time this did happen, that was kind of the overall trend and setup. And even in this instance, we actually were below EMA support. So now that we are on top of EMA support, we're actually expecting a little bit more upside pressure out of this RSI and the stochastic RSI as well. Now, over on Twitter or X have been posting some analysis about the short-term Bitcoin chart and is relevant since we know that STX is obviously super correlated to the Bitcoin blockchain and Bitcoin. And so coming off of the having this type of setup and a very nice bullish break and a very nice backtest confirmation and follow through is hugely important to let us know that we are getting some more upside and that likely we're going to start to see at least a little bit more upside pressure and try to get a little bit more of those better formations and setups on some of the longer term charts as well over the 1 hour anyway. So the 4 hour first and then obviously the daily from there. But right now, looking at the short-term charts, Bitcoin is still looking very strong, which does mean that that should have a lot of impact and rub off to STX, STX as well. So if you're not currently following me over on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it, @coin_trades is the handle over there. Do look forward to chatting with everyone and keeping you all updated on different types of analysis over on Twitter or X. Just want to look at some Fibonacci's here really quick before we wrap up. So from the previous low back in January, around 1.25 to the current trend high-ish around 380. Looking at a pullback and retracement, looking at a very nice kickoff and defense of the 61.8%, which is pretty much what we want to see is prices pulling back and maintaining supports on top of that level. So since we are getting a little bit of upside and follow through now, especially above the 38.2, we are going to be looking at the 23.6, which has been previous resistance before if we do look left. So probably expect to get stuck up in this zone. Like we said, we would want to see prices stabilizing and consolidating and confirming these new exponential moving averages as support, especially with that trend line as support, and probably coming in with resistance on the upside trend line. So going to see what happens from there. Probably not going to experience too much more upside on the current move without just a lot more bullish volume, which we haven't really seen so far. So really, we are going to need to get a little bit of a break, especially since we have been rallying pretty good off the lows. So off the lows, up about 35%, without really a big chance to cool down on the daily here. And even looking at VPVR volume profile, visible range, you can see over here on the right, big point of mass still getting stuck up at. So if we can break above about 315 or so and actually break above this previous resistance level, then there's a pretty strong case to actually see that flip as support, but not necessarily the most likely scenario in this point, since we are still going to be expecting to come up to resistance around that level and then try to flip and actually maintain some higher lows, confirming that daily higher low and trying to reverse the trend back in favor of some bullish upside, which we are kind of expecting right now at this point based on a lot of the setups that we've seen out of Bitcoin and other cryptos. Overall, though, yeah, still expecting a little period of a cool down that's not really going to be instantly exciting, so probably a lot of chop and a lot of indecision for quite some time, but obviously nothing super extremely bearish, we hope anyway, unless we do start to see kind of some tanks coming in. But because we have seen so much retracement crypto-wide for a period of about the last couple of months, and especially a lot of great things coming in here soon, don't really expect a lot of extreme bearish action for most cryptos, including Stacks STX right now. So right now, overall, looking at the $3 psychological level, hopefully that can hold, get a little higher to the 310, 320 level as well, like we talked about. But otherwise, yeah, that is going to go ahead and wrap up the show for today on Stacks STX on that ticker. Hope everyone enjoyed. If you did, please hit the thumbs up, like, and subscribe if you have not done so just yet. Don't forget to post all questions, comments, issues, disagreements, all that stuff down below in the comment sections. Do love getting back to each and every one of you. Don't forget to drop me a follow over on Twitter or X at @coin_trades is the handle. Looking forward to chatting with everyone over there. But yeah, I do appreciate all the continued love and support as always. Does mean so much. Stay safe, take care, coin traders, and I will catch you back in the next video.